minut nu. Hvad siger du? Ja. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here once again to talk to you, and I have to remind you once again, as I did last year, that my English is not perfect, and I might get stuck in some words. I hope you will apologize for that, or you shouldn't apologize. I should, and I hope you will carry on. You will just listen on. And then I will also, because I'm always a bit nervous talking at Bornhack, then I might talk very fast. If it gets too fast or you can't understand what I'm saying, please raise your arms or something like that. Shortly about me, I used to do a radio show called Aflyttet at a radio station which has been shut down called Radio 24/7. I'm currently an independent journalist, and I do a different kind of journalistic work. I do talks like this, and I do some sort of lobbying business, which I'll get back to right away. This is a full disclosure of part of this talk. I have a cooperation with the security business, which is very interesting since I'm not at all agree with them. These are the guys who are putting up cameras all over the place, but we have a common interest in keeping cash around. So they are paying to put up websites and to make some videos and stuff like that, and I run around in the country and talk about cash, what is going on about this thing currently. So just so we make clear about this, it's not a lot. It's not a lot of money, just so you know. Unfortunately, and they don't even pay cash. In Denmark, we have 456 cash payments of about 208 kroner each year in this country, and we have 771 billion kroners in cash around, which is a pretty big amount of money. And we have 2,471 ATMs, or at least we had, because currently the banks are taking them down. There's been fewer ATMs in Denmark, I think, and they are disappearing rapidly. But this story actually starts in 2016, where something in Denmark called Betalingsrådet starts thinking about what about the future of money. Could Denmark maybe become cashless? And one of the central points in this cashless stuff is that they need to get rid of a law that I'm going to get back to, which in Denmark is called Betalingsloven, the law about payments, and which some of the businesses are a bit angry about. But they had this Betalingsrådet, had a lot of talks about what is the future for money in Denmark, and they talked around this for a long time, and then they ended up saying that they couldn't really decide what to do. That was 2016. It would be a good idea to kind of let the businesses themselves decide whether they should take cash or only cards or only mobile pay. But on the other hand, that would leave some people out, so they don't really take a decision. But it has been going on in the political spectrum since then. There has been politicians trying to get through with cashless society in Denmark. It hasn't gone very far. They've mainly been blocked by the Corporation of Elderly People. Ældresagen has stopped everything on its tracks, so it didn't go further. But things are moving on. There are certain arguments against cash that I'm going to start with here. The first thing is criminals steal cash if you got them, so it's a risky thing to have cash around. Criminals use cash because they're not traceable. They're used in moonshine work where you don't want to pay taxes. Drugs are bought with cash. Cash is ineffective in a modern world. It's too slow and it's too expensive to move it around. In short, they are old-fashioned and they are not digital in any way. And they're dirty, and this I'll elaborate on a bit later, because that's a main point in some of the things I'm going to talk about. In Denmark, we have a very interesting situation about money. We are a constitutional monarchy in this country, meaning that we actually have the queen on all our money. Not all of them, but some of them, at least the coins. And it's also in Denmark, it's called the queen's money, or kongens mønt originally. The people who are able to support Denmark with cash is called Nationalbanken, and they're the ones who can do it. And they've been printing cash at Nationalbanken for many years, but they don't do that anymore because it's too expensive to make money, which is a bit of a contradiction in my terms. So they have decided that it's too expensive because there's been a drop in the use of cash. They don't need to print that many, so they decided to rationalize. So what they did was to close down a business which has been a core Danish business for about 600 years. Of printing Danish money, and the first thing that they've been doing was to put the machines to make money up for sale, and they have been sold to somebody because there's a big demand for them, says the director of the National Bank, for these machines. So they sold them. So we probably can't just go back to printing our own money. And then afterwards, they have taken these money, taking the money, and said to the French people are now producing the cash, to call it the notes, the banknotes, and we have Finnish people who are producing the Danish coins. And that has apparently that had saved the Danish state for something like 20 million kroners, which is a very small amount of money if we're talking about cash in general. So, what has happened to money in Denmark? And that's not the only country this has happened to. It's all over the world. It is that money has been separated from the state. It is now produced somewhere else. It's just something in the cloud, maybe. It's not really something national. We are producing them anywhere else if we want to, and it's not really connected to Denmark, or at least they could try to distance themselves from it. This is the law that all the businesses hate. It's called the cash rule. It says that if you run a shop and you take credit cards and you take mobile pay at the same time, then you also have to take cash. The different kinds of payments have the same position. But the businesses are very angry about it because they think it's a waste of time. They don't want to have money lying around, and they don't want to have to put it into the bank and count them and have to have change and stuff like that. So they are very much opposed to it. So we are doing it the salami way of getting rid of cash, because currently we still have this cash rule, but now we are saying that after 10 o'clock in the evening, you don't have to take cash. If you are a supermarket or if you are a petrol station or anything else, you don't need it. And you don't, if you're a petrol station in general and there's no one around, you don't have to take cash at all. So it has kind of started. And the argument is generally that there's a big risk of robbery if the businesses are open till after 10. Then there's a risk of robbery, and they're actually using the word because it's dark in the evening. Then there's the risk of robbery. So just remember when you go outside here tonight. But then there's the law that the citizens of this country hate, which is called the whitewashing law. Which says that you cannot pay for anything in Denmark which costs above 50,000 kroners in cash. If you have to pay for something that costs more than 50,000 kroners, you have to get the money through a bank. So it needs to be registered that you move the money around. It's illegal, and you will get a fine if you try to do it and somebody finds out. And then there's the other thing, you can pay people with them, but if you have, for example, if you have a small business, and you sell something for 8,000 in kroners, then you have to put it into the tax system too. So it's troublesome thing. This guy is a cook. He ran into this whitewashing law because he had some dinner parties that he was where he was preparing food, and then after the weekend was going, then he had 50,250 kroners in cash that the people had paid them, and he took them to his bank and to put it into a deposit in his bank, on his bank account, and then he went on holiday. And while he was on holiday, he got a call from a family member saying that the police is at your house and they're roaming around and looking for you. What have you done? And he said, "Oh, I don't think I've done anything." And then he called the police from where he was at holiday, and they said that they had he had gotten turned in by somebody who said that he had put in more than 50,000 on his bank account. His bank has called the police, and then he actually had to take it to court. It fell. He didn't get a conviction because it was such a small amount over, but it took a lot of his time at the present time. Well, I don't know how many of you people have been to Roskilde Festival. The Roskilde Festival don't take cash anymore. They have reasons, which is that a lot of people are working there are volunteers, and they don't want them messing around with money, and there's a lot of money going around at Roskilde Festival, so they have gone cashless at Roskilde a long time ago, and a lot of bigger music festivals are doing the same. That raises some other questions in the future, which is that you can't just buy 6 bottles of vodka and it's not registered somewhere. If you do it with cash, nobody knows. If you do it with a credit card, somebody knows. The banks are getting ready for this. They are hoping for a time where cash is absolute. This is from a page from I think it's Jyske Bank, where they are saying get ready for a cashless everyday life. And they have, for example, found out if you should, in the past, you could give people a present, for example, money. You could give a child a present in money. But now you can give them presents via mobile pay money gifts. So they will have I think it's some sort of happy kind of graphics that pops up when you give the money on mobile pay. So it's saying it's both fun and easy to give and open a digital money gift. And then there's pocket money for the children. They are saying this should be solved by giving the children a credit card that can't be overdrawn, which they should run around with instead. And the same thing about money for a tour or something like that. You have a card for each thing. I would like to, now we are getting back to the point I was talking about dirty money. I'm now going to play a video. I hope it will work, because it's for YouTube. This video is from 2010, and it kind of starts a global trend we are seeing now. But just watch it and see what it is. This was Saatchi and Saatchi advertise made for Visa. And that is actually an agenda that they have kept on with ever since. And then came COVID-19, which we will talk a bit about during this. And I also have to put in that if somebody has some questions or remarks or something, just put up your fingers. We can take them along the way. Otherwise, there will be a bit of time after I've been talking up here from. This is bus drivers from Denmark. They were afraid of getting COVID-19 when people pay cash. So now the Minister of Transport, Benny Engelbrecht, just said you don't need to take cash. So he actually stopped it in buses. There used to be at the main sector, it used to be a part of the buses legacy that they should take cash, but they don't need to do it anymore anywhere because of COVID-19. And the reason that all this stuff started about cash and COVID-19 is because of the WHO, which made they made just one remark about saying that if you handle cash, you should wash your hands, which is, in my opinion, pretty logical. But this was immediately in the media set out to be that dirty banknotes may be spreading the coronavirus. The WHO suggests. And that wasn't true, and the WHO needed to actually take it back, what they actually meant about this. And the main point of what they actually meant is that you should wash your hands when you touch stuff that other people has touched, which is pretty basic in almost everything. And then there's another thing, is that corona doesn't infect you through your hands. It infects you when you take your hands and put them into your mouth or your nose or something else. So wash your hands, and it should be absolutely no problem. We actually have 3 big countries. We have Germany, Austria, and Sweden's national banks had to go out and say it's not dangerous to use cash. Just keep on doing it like you do. And the Danish National Bank has also said the same thing and been confirming about saying cash is not a carrier of COVID-19. But one of the things you actually, because you shouldn't be afraid of cash, is that it doesn't stick to paper, COVID-19, for very long, but it sticks to mobile phones, and it sticks to plastic cards, and what do you call it, big metal plates or stuff like that. It sits there for a very long time. This is old news for everybody, but this was before COVID-19, that there are 10 times more bacteria on mobile phones. So just beware. This is from a scientific talk with a scientific guy about the infection risk of COVID-19 during on smooth glass and plastic. And it says that COVID-19 can actually survive for up to 9 days. On a mobile phone. But you can clean it. I må ikke bruge acetone. You shouldn't use acetone. This may seem a bit harsh for just using a phone, but she was also she's talking about situations in hospitals, for example, where they actually have very strict laws about this. No one listened to this. We immediately continued the cash is dirty thing. Credit cards may be even dirtier, so you need to use, for example, Apple Pay, which is very nice and much cleaner, which has been the word at the media. So that's where it continues. And then we got these guys, Visa once again. Visa is having a very clear agenda of moving towards so-called cashless cities. They also have different competitions where you can put your business in and saying if you develop a good cashless idea, they will give you some money and put you some exposure on their website. But they have a very nice interesting expression about cashless. They're using the word digital maturity. It's only the towns that have digital maturity which has reached this point. And I have to tell you, which is probably not a surprise, that Denmark, we are very digitally mature in all kinds of senses. Also on the map down there, which you can study yourself on the Visa website. Also here on Bornhack, we have the future of payment is here. I just discovered this morning. It's probably unfair to the company, but at least they have the future is fast and seamless, and there's a new way of paying money without using anything except bank accounts from one to one. The word that keeps coming back is the word frictionless. We want a world where it's easy to pay things. So there's no problem with it. We don't want coins in our pockets. It should be easy. It should be almost like not paying. But if you're talking easy, we also means hidden, and we do something without thinking about it. It's something that happens inside a machine. Friction, in my opinion, means you make an effort and you work, but you also know what you're doing. You know what's happening. In Denmark, again, I'm sorry for the English-speaking persons around, but Denmark is a good example for many things. We have one bank which is extremely determined to get rid of cash. It's called Jyske Bank. They are so determined that they, in their own will, they have simply taken away the 1,000 kroner notes. You're not allowed to take out 1,000 kroner notes from Jyske Bank anymore, because as their boss says, it's only criminals who use 1,000 kroner notes, and nobody can use them for anything. So we are not going to pay them out. And he actually, and he simply says, that if we get a cashless society, it will stop bank robberies, it will lower drug criminality and people who are cheating on social welfare. And moonshining will not be possible, he says. And he says that's a political agenda he has in this sense. And he goes for something like 2025, which in my opinion is pretty realistic. So what's at stake here? What is happening if we remove cash? And once again, we will start with the obvious ones. We have older people who like cash and who are dependent on cash in their daily use. Maybe they're not able to use net banking. Maybe they can't use a smartphone. Maybe they don't have one. Maybe they have problems using credit cards. I actually know of old people who have problems seeing the small screens on credit cards, ATMs. So they want to get into the bank to get their money out and go back to themselves and use them from there. But the main argument against the problem with older people is that they will die at some time, and then we will have a young and frictionless generation ready to live in a cash-free society. The problem with that argument is that we are forgetting that we are all going to get old sometime. and it might be when we are, let's say, plus 70, we don't want to meddle around with an iPhone anymore, or our eyes can't see what is going on, or we have some sort of disability making it impossible for use of electronic means. So the problem that we currently see in old people might very well be our own within, let's say, 50 or 30 years, depending on how old you are. There's another problem, which is people who don't have a bank account, people who are maybe homeless or living rough, and the solution would probably be the same as we were talking about before with the kids. Give them some sort of cards that they can use, and then the problem is solved. And then there are kids; they can't have real credit cards, but some are already made for them. In that sense, but that's the obvious problems with cash, which we have just with the cash-free society, which we have just killed now and said it's not going to be a problem. But it is a problem. In Great Britain and the UK, we have a cash system on the verge of collapse, as they say, which means that about 8 million people in the UK can't function without cash. Because they need it, because some of them don't have bank accounts, some of them are elderly, but they've simply, there are some big organizations who counted how many people it's about, and in England it's about 8 million. In Denmark we're talking about something like 20 to 25% of the population. So it's also a big number there. But the real problems, in my opinion, is the loss of anonymity. And that all the cashless payments are open for tracking and tracing, and then there's security, which is also a problem about, in my opinion, about electronic money. And I know there's some people among you out there who are Bitcoin experts and very clever on that and believe in that technology. I have my doubts, especially about security in the long run, because it's always a weapons race, arms race about who's getting in and out of this. But there will be a problem. You can't hack a banknote. It's impossible to hack. If I have a banknote, you can't hack it for me. It is what it is. But the market for cybercrime is now bigger than the market for drugs in the world. It's 2 or 3 times bigger, actually. And these are numbers. They're from 2017 and 18 about the estimated cost of cyber attacks per organization in 15 different countries. And that's a lot of money and a lot of vulnerability out there about this stuff. Cybercrime, as they say in this article, will remain a large-scale concern for years to come. They mean that approximately 5.2 trillion in global value will be at risk of cyber attacks, creating an ongoing challenge for corporations and investors alike. That's a lot of money, and that's electronic money that crime is currently into. Not all criminals are going cyber. In Sweden, where they actually have a partly cashless society, we have some very creative and very rough criminals. Since they can't rob banks anymore, there's no cash around and it's very hard to get out. Then they have started, among other things, to steal very rare birds, like a certain owl that they can sell somewhere in Eastern Europe. And they go to great lengths for it. There's also been these kind of James Bond-like attacks on large trucks loaded with new Apple computers, where people were jumping off bridges to take over this truck and get inside and sell the content somewhere else. And then there's actually been there has been a rise on assault robbery and fraud. People are mugging each other on the streets, and what they're stealing now is not their money. They're stealing their phones. And then they're telling them to transfer money, or threatening them to transfer money in one sense or the other, because everything is inside the phone, and you can force people to do a lot of stuff if you are holding a knife to them. In that sense, I know Rasmus Malver, who sits down there. There's another vulnerability in all this stuff, which is that people who have disabilities or maybe are mentally not that up to date may have In Denmark, they still may have what is called an MID, which is a digital way of legitimizing yourself in front of banks and stuff. And they are also getting threats for people to give up their NemID so people can take their money or maybe take their apartment or stuff like that. That's the kind of vulnerabilities that follows along with mass digitalization. You don't need to sign stuff anymore. You can do it all electronically, meaning that if somebody takes control over what you are using to sign with electronically, they can sign for you if they have your password, of course, but that can be beaten out of people too. The interesting thing about Sweden is that even if they are trying to become a cashless society, they have an awareness about what we could call critical infrastructure, and they have an awareness about war, because they're situated very close to, they have always had Russian submarines in their waters, and they generally see Russia as a military threat to this day. So a couple of years ago, they made this this publication called "If Crisis or War Comes," which is a series of good advices to people. What should you do if things stop working in society? For example, if the grid goes down and you don't have electricity, if there's a major hack attack on the whole country and nothing works, what should you have lying around in your house? There's, of course, you need to have water and food and warmth, and you should have a mobile phone, but they also have this point in right down in the right corner. You have to have cash in small dominions, which means you have to have small cash in smaller notes, so you can pay your way along, or you can buy stuff. And they still do that. They also do that in Germany. They also say you should keep cash around if war comes. They actually used to be, during the Cold War, the Swedish government had a stash of money which they could, which the army could give out if the war could come, so people could pay each other, or so they could pay their way through the country. I don't know if they have that war stash anymore, but they used to have. So did Denmark. But Bitcoins. And again, I'm not that clever on Bitcoins. It may be good and it may work in the future, but people who has been really extremely paranoid and desperately wants to succeed, that must be ISIS. ISIS has been doing a hell of a lot of scams recently on the internet. They also did a COVID-19 mask scam, where they made a fake website. You could buy 100,000 masks for a lot of money, and they earned a great deal of money on that. And then they invested them in Bitcoins and tried to hide them best as they could. But they were actually found out by this company called Chainalysis. It's a Danish company who are currently very good at tracing where Bitcoin streams go. And in the case of ISIS, it meant that the Department of Justice were able to confiscate all the Bitcoins. So that kind of makes me wonder whether these money are safer than others if the state can actually track them and take them away from you. We are currently living in a time where we are leaving more and more data behind us. We have very large digital footprints, most of us. I know all of you are very information aware, and you of course don't leave any footprints around anywhere, but ordinary people do. And I certainly do. If you're using social media and you're doing stuff and you're searching on Google and you have a Gmail, then you have a heavy digital trace. These digital traces are being used heavily to manipulate you and to make you buy stuff and to make a profile on you. And the new trend is social scoring, where you kind of get. We all heard about the Chinese situation, where you have where the Chinese kind of give their citizen a score, which then gives them the right to, for example, better hotels or travel or things like that. But we are actually doing the same. But we're doing it behind the citizens' backs, because it's companies like CoreLogic and TransUnion, for example, which is mentioned in a very good article from the Washington Post. They simply take all this data from floating around, buy it from some of the tech giants or collect it themselves, and do it to make a score that credit rating companies can use to look into it. And the problem is that if some of you want to buy a house and you get a bad score and you say you can't really, and you start, but why do I have such a bad score? Then your bank will not be able to precisely tell you why, because they've just bought this score from another company that they kind of trust. And if you go to this other company, you will not be able to get into the data unless you live in California, where you actually have a possibility to opt out of this data collection. It is not possible if you live in Denmark. And how is this being used? One thing is credit score and credit reports. How much can you buy and things? But there's also another thing, which is a new thing that has come up recently, which is also kind of funny. There's a company which every time you buy something on the internet, and if you return it, then this company registers it. And then it combines your return policy. How much stuff of the stuff you buy do you return? It combines that with other data they can find around, and then they calculate whether you should be allowed to return your goods to the company. And then they tell the company that this guy, he's only allowed to return stuff 3 times. And otherwise, he's just lost. He can't return his things because the company won't accept it. So it's the kind of numbers we are ending up looking into. Freedom is is a big word to use. In my opinion, if we are tracked and recorded, we are not free, or at least not totally free. Because being free means being able to move around without being tracked and recorded, and without people knowing where we are. And I know we can all live with some degree of tracking and some degree of recording, but there's a point where I think we are currently overstepping the line. Who will gain from if we get rid of cash? In this sense, we will have banks, finance, and the tech giants. They will have more data on their customers because they will be able to, if they know what you're using your money for. Every time you pay on mobile pay, you actually also transmit a location where you are at the time, what you're doing, unless you're obfuscated, but you're doing that. They can charge you for using money. It's not possible yet or never to put an extra amount of money on top of a cash payment and saying, because you pay cash, you should pay more. I know actually somebody are trying to get into it, but it's not possible yet. And then they can manipulate it through the data they're collecting. There's lots of possibilities of nudging. And there's again the sale of what is currently called futures, which is the idea of what will people do in tomorrow because of what they have been doing yesterday. What did they buy at the supermarket? Which bar did they go to? What concerts did they go? Will they go again and again and again? And then we can track all people's bad habits, like smoking, drinking, eating bad things, meaning profiling for insurance and bank loans much further. I actually have a friend who has no problem using credit cards and mobile pay, but when he goes down to buy cigarettes, he buys them only with cash. Because he says he's absolutely sure it will come up someday. Someday somebody will start using that kind of information against him and he doesn't want it. The government would like a cash-free society because they believe it would stop moonshine work. I don't even know if that's the correct word for work without paying tax, but I think it sounds right. And they'll be able to tax all transactions, and they will have a control over economy because they will be able to look digitally inside what people are using in general, and they wouldn't have this dark number that cash actually is. You don't know what people are using cash for. Currently, we use fewer cash than we did before, but we still have a hell of a lot of cash floating around. And everybody's wondering, what are people doing with it? In my opinion, I think they're probably saving it somewhere, putting it in their mattresses or something like that. We don't know. Then there's the citizens, which are the last group. They have one pro, which is convenience. It's practical not to use cash. The cons about it is that their spending becomes data points. They will lack autonomy. They will lose control. There will be more tracking, and they have to pay to use money, and it will end their privacy. Because actually, cash is one of the last places we can do something which is private. If I give you a banknote and you spend it afterwards, then nobody knows that it comes from me. Convenience, this is current convenience trends. In the 60s, we were afraid that the government might wiretap our houses. Now we have our wiretaps standing inside our homes saying, do you have a recipe for pancakes? This is Elisha Otis. In 1853, he invented the first elevator that didn't free fall if you cut the cable. And he did it and he got a great success. He went to a mess where for people who were tradespeople, and then he put up his elevator, and then he got a guy to cut over the rope and let it fall from a high rate, and it only fell like 2 centimeters before the brakes kind of locked in. So that was an instant success he made there. The interesting thing is that we have elevators that are totally safe since 1853, but we still have these. We still have stairs all over the place. Not because we fear of falling down or the elevator shouldn't work, but because sometimes the elevators don't work. They don't go up and down, and if there's a fire, we would like a go somewhere where we can get away from the fire without having to go into an elevator and maybe burn. That's where I think where we are with cash currently. Cash is the stairs, and the cash-free is the elevators. Could we do something to maintain cash in the environment? I'm a bit in doubt actually. I think that the banks may end up getting their way in 2025, but until then we can maybe use cash a bit more. How many uses cash in here? But I think you are a select group of people. But I think, and we could have a slogan and say a little cash every day keeps the data points at bay. We actually made a questionnaire for Danish people, and they, although they don't generally use much cash, they don't want to get rid of it. They still want it. And what's more interesting, they also want the possibility to take their cash out of the bank, which should scare the banks a bit. Cash, in my opinion, is the canary in the coal mine. If we lose it, we lost control. We should keep it. Sorry? Okay, I'll go closer to the microphone. Cash is the canary in the coal mine. If we lose it, we lost control. We should keep cash as the fire escape stair alongside everything else. I'm not saying we should not use digital payment. Of course we should. But we should keep cash along because it's a good thing to have when everything hits the fan. And just to take some of the very short examples here about crime and cash, which is interesting. Because everybody says that cash is criminal. We had a very bad money laundering case in a big bank of Denmark, which is called Danske Bank. It was at the scale of 1,500 billion Danish kroners, which is a hell of a lot of money. If somebody should try to take this money around in cash, they would need a stack of the now defunct 500 euros, which should be 40 kilometers high, which is a bit of a problem in physical terms if you should move that kind of money around. And then we got the British businessman, which was Sanjay Shah. He ripped off the Danish state of 12.7 billion kroners in a tax scam. It was all electronic crime. There was no, but he has the money anyway. And it was not a cash, and we can't get them back, by the way, because we tried to sue him in England, and we didn't get away. So we lost 12.7 million kroner because of IT. And if you take identity theft, it costs something like $16 billion in the United States every year. Short takeaways before I can take some questions. The good thing about cash, in my opinion, is it is analog. It is what it is. It's worth what it's worth. It's untrackable or/hard to track because you can't track cash if you take down the numbers. if you have cash, you have sort of control of what your money, where your money goes, and you can, at least you could see them leaving your hands. And usually it happens too fast. Cash don't judge you. Cash don't need credit rating. They don't need identity checks before payments, and you don't need to charge cash. They don't run out of power. It works, so don't fix it. And if there's any questions.
The ombudsman has said to a lot of stores and shops that you cannot deny taking cash due to COVID-19. Do you know if the traffic minister of Denmark can overrule ombudsman in case of the bus situation?
No, actually I don't. But I think I think he just did. He did it. So and the chauffeurs were on strike at the time, and they went back to work.
Okay.
So I think he actually overruled it. But the ombudsman has later in the later period of COVID-19 actually sent out a reminder to all the shops that they have to take cash.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned that companies would be able to charge for if we have a society for doing transactions.
Mm.
How about our legal systems gonna allow shops to charge for cash in order to
So, I don't know if we can. No. We currently have a situation where we are going up. This sounds a bit sad since I'm fighting the cause of cash. But I don't think we're going to win in the end. I think it will go away mainly because there's very, very powerful forces behind removing them. And we are currently in a situation where banks hate cash so much that you actually have to pay the banks to have cash in the bank. It's called negative interest rates, and that's going on in most of Denmark, and it costs a lot of money to have them around. And then we will probably see a tendency among very rich people to either invest their money in something else or to take them out of the bank and put them in a safe somewhere in Switzerland. Or invest them in gold bars or something else that easily replace, so they don't have to pay negative interest rates. Yeah, but I think it will be something will happen during the time. It's mainly a question about how long can we kind of withhold this, and could we maybe hope for some, let's call it common sense among politicians, so they will say that this actually doesn't cost that much, and it's a good and solid system, and it's part of an infrastructure, so we need to keep it around. I don't know if I answered your question, actually. Yeah.
You have an offer for a third alternative, not digital, not cash. You talk about the
Yeah, I don't have an offer for a third alternative. I think maybe we could start swapping. Things, which could be nice. We could you give me. Yeah, animals or things like that, but that might be a bit like a civilizationary backlash. Yeah. So maybe we could find out something else we could trade within. Maybe there's a lot of talk about. It's called, what's it called? It's attention economy. I think it's called currently eyeballs, saying that we could get paid to stare at Facebook pages, maybe. Yeah.
We also have a fixed exchange rate with the euro, so we do have an alternative form of cash.
Yeah.
So they can really stop private persons from just swapping euros. But there have also been cases of politically incorrect organizations being blocked from receiving donations. Like WikiLeaks had some issues with getting donations at some point.
It was Visa at the time who blocked them getting money. Yeah, it would be. Anything else? Yeah. So you don't want to use kroner because you don't like the Danish state. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. It is, but I think I mainly think about the good thing about cash is compared to cryptocurrencies is that it's concrete. It's something you can move around and you can have it in your pockets, and you don't need to fire up a computer to move it and to send things from one part of the country to the other. And we also need to take into if a society like Denmark should work, you should need to have some sort of currency that everybody agrees on, and then we can have the other stuff on the side maybe. I don't know if that's the answer, but I understand what you're talking about. We could also change society so you could be proud of the coins.